Ever pondered over how a country's economy can go from thriving to total collapse in just a few years? Let's take a trip down memory lane to the Zimbabwe of the late 80s. It was a time of hope and promise, a period when the country's economy was on an upswing. Then in the early 80s enters Robert Mugabe, a charismatic leader who championed a series of economic reforms. The nation held its breath as these reforms started to take effect, and initially, they seemed to be a success. The promise of a prosperous Zimbabwe seemed tantalizingly close, a beacon of hope in a continent often marred by economic instability. But as we all know, promises can be broken, and hopes can be dashed. As we will see in the following scenes, the story of Zimbabwe's economic reforms is a cautionary tale of mismanagement, corruption, and unforeseen consequences. However, as it turned out, this promise was not to be fulfilled. The turn of the millennium marked the beginning of Zimbabwe's economic downfall. A key player in this downfall was Robert Mugabe's decision to appease war veterans, a significant political force. He granted them land, irrespective of their capacity or knowledge to farm. Mugabe's land reforms, initially intended to address historic injustices, quickly turned into a political tool. War veterans, many without any farming experience, were suddenly handed vast tracts of fertile land. The result was a catastrophic decline in agricultural productivity. The once flourishing fields of Zimbabwe, rich with maize, tobacco, and wheat, fell silent. As food production plummeted, food prices soared. Zimbabwe, once known as the breadbasket of Africa, was now unable to feed its own people. Basic commodities became luxuries, out of reach for the average Zimbabwean. This economic shock pushed the country into the deadly spiral of hyperinflation. The land reforms, while noble in intent, were poorly executed. They disrupted the delicate balance of food production and supply, triggering a sharp rise in food prices. And with agriculture being the lifeblood of Zimbabwe's economy, this misstep had dire consequences. The war veterans, once heroes in the liberation struggle, were now seen as contributors to the country's economic woes. The land they had fought for was now a symbol of Zimbabwe's decline. Agriculture, once the backbone of the economy, was now its Achilles heel. The mismanagement of land reforms set the stage for Zimbabwe's economic collapse, a collapse from which the nation is still struggling to recover. With the economy in freefall, international sanctions only added fuel to the fire. The European Union and the International Monetary Fund, alarmed by Zimbabwe's financial mismanagement and human rights abuses, imposed crippling sanctions. These sanctions targeted key sectors of the economy, including the banking industry. The sanctions were not just about punishing Zimbabwe's government but also about trying to motivate change. However, the unintended consequence was a banking sector left gasping for breath. The banking sector, once a vibrant engine of the economy, was now under intense pressure. Banks, which are ordinarily the lifeblood of an economy, providing crucial loans for businesses and consumers, found themselves in a precarious position. With the sanctions in place, international loans and financial support, which are often the lifeline of the banking sector, dried up. This left banks in Zimbabwe struggling to function, let alone thrive. But international sanctions were not the only challenge facing the banking sector. Political corruption and looting further exacerbated the situation. Government officials, instead of using the banks to mobilize funds for investment, used them as personal piggy banks. The looting of state resources, coupled with the sanctions, left the banking sector in a state of paralysis. In the face of these challenges, the banks found it impossible to fulfill their crucial role in the economy. The funds that should have been channeled into investments and development were either locked away due to sanctions or siphoned off by corrupt officials. The result was a banking sector that was unable to support economic growth and development. The collapse of the banking sector had far-reaching consequences. It led to a severe liquidity crisis, with banks unable to provide customers with their money. It also meant that businesses struggled to get the loans they needed to operate and expand. The damage to the banking sector rippled through the economy, exacerbating the financial crisis. The banking sector, once a beacon of hope, was now a symbol of despair. In a desperate attempt to keep the economy afloat, the government took a step that sealed Zimbabwe's fate. The decision was made to print vast sums of money, ostensibly to fund the military in the Democratic Republic of Congo. This desperate move, however, had far-reaching and devastating consequences. As the government flooded the economy with money, the value of the Zimbabwean dollar plummeted. The result was hyperinflation, a situation where prices increase so rapidly that everyday goods become unaffordable. At the height of this crisis, inflation rates reached an almost unfathomable level, with prices doubling every 24 hours. This was a financial disaster of unprecedented proportions. While hyperinflation was ravaging the economy, institutional corruption was eroding public trust. Government officials were seen to be enriching themselves while the rest of the population struggled with poverty and hunger. This blatant corruption, coupled with the government's economic mismanagement, further diminished the value of the Zimbabwean dollar. The currency, which was once a symbol of national pride, was now a laughingstock. It was so devalued that people were forced to carry bags of money for simple transactions. The government eventually had to issue $100 trillion notes, a testament to the extent of the economic disaster. Zimbabwe's currency, once a symbol of national pride, was now worthless. This is the tragic tale of a nation brought to its knees by hyperinflation and institutional corruption. As Zimbabwe's neighbor, South Africa watched this economic tragedy unfold with a sense of dread and anticipation. The collapse of Zimbabwe's economy underlines the dire consequences of policy missteps, poor governance, and rampant corruption. It's a lesson South Africa can ill afford to ignore, particularly as it grapples with its own economic and political challenges. The importance of economic stability cannot be overstated. It's the bedrock on which nations build their future. Similarly, good governance is not a luxury, but a necessity. It is the key to maintaining investor confidence, encouraging economic growth, and ensuring social stability. South Africa must learn from Zimbabwe's failures. It must avoid the pitfalls of poorly planned land reforms, resist the temptations of political looting, and strive for transparency in all its dealings. It's a harsh reminder that economic prosperity, once lost, can be incredibly hard to regain. If you like this video, please subscribe, like, and comment. Also add what you think was omitted in the comment section.